The wind carried the smell of smoke and fear. It was late evening when the human traveler reached the alien village. His boots were covered in dust from the long road, and his coat hung heavy from the weight of old battles. He had come here only to rest for a night, maybe two, before moving on, but the moment he stepped into the village square, he felt the tension in the air like a blade pressed to his neck. The streets were almost empty. Shops were closed, even though the sun had not yet set. Doors and windows were barred from the inside, here and there. He saw a few faces peeking out, alien faces with wide eyes and trembling hands. When they saw him looking, they quickly shut their windows again. He went to the small inn by the side of the road. The innkeeper, an old alien man with gray skin and tired eyes, looked up at him but didn't smile. "You should not be here," the old man muttered. "Not tonight." The human frowned. "Why?" "I'm just looking for a bed and a meal." The innkeeper's hands shook as he placed a cup of water on the counter. "They will come," he whispered. "They always come when the red moon rises." Before the human could ask who they were, a loud sound echoed through the village. Not a sound of footsteps, not the wind, but something heavier, slower, like claws dragging across stone. The human turned his head, scanning the streets, but saw nothing. The innkeeper quickly locked the door and blew out the lamps, leaving only shadows. That was when he heard its soft crying from somewhere outside. It was a woman's voice, full of fear and sorrow. He moved to the window and saw her, an alien woman holding a small child in her arms. She was rushing from one door to another, knocking, begging, but nobody opened for her. The human could hear her words clearly now. "Please, just for the night, please let us in." Every door stayed shut. The human's jaw tightened. He left the inn despite the old man's protests. When he reached her, she turned quickly, eyes wide, as if expecting an attack. Her skin was pale silver, her hair tangled from the wind, and her clothes torn. The child in her arms clung to her neck, hiding his face. "They will come," she said, almost in a whisper. "They will smell us." "Who?" the human asked, keeping his voice calm. "The night creatures," she said, her voice breaking. "They take people. They eat them alive." She looked at him desperately. "You should leave before it's too late." Instead of leaving, he looked around the empty street. The silence was unnatural. No dogs barking, no children playing, no market noise. It felt like the whole village was holding its breath. He glanced up and saw the red moon beginning to rise over the horizon. The alien mother followed his gaze and shivered. "They come when the moon is like blood," she said, "and tonight it will be full." The human thought of leaving, just walking away before trouble found him. He was tired, his body still healing from an old wound on his side. But then he saw the child peek from behind his mother's shoulder. The boy's eyes were big and full of terror, eyes that had seen too much for someone so small. He sighed and stepped closer. "Where is your home?" he asked. We have no home anymore," she replied, her voice cracking. "The creatures took it, and everyone in it." Her grip on the child tightened. "We've been hiding, running, but there's nowhere left to go." A deep growl rumbled in the distance. It wasn't close yet, but it was enough to make her knees weaken. The child buried his face in her neck again. The human turned toward the sound, his hand brushing the hilt of his blade. His instincts told him trouble was coming, and soon. "You need a safe place," he said firmly. "There is no safe place," she replied. "Not from them." "Then maybe it's time someone stopped them," he said, his voice low but certain. She stared at him in shock. "No one fights them," she said quickly. "They come in hundreds, 300, maybe more. They tear everything apart." Her fear was real, but so was the disbelief in her eyes. She thought he was crazy. He thought of turning away again. But something deep inside wouldn't let him. The growl came again, louder this time, closer. Shadows flickered at the far end of the street. Shapes moved in the darkness, crawling, shifting. Their eyes glinting faintly. The human could feel his pulse quicken. The alien mother held her child tighter, whispering something in a language. He didn't understand. The night creatures were coming. And the red moon had only just begun to rise. The growls in the distance did not fade. They grew louder, joined by the sound of claws scraping against stone and wood. Every scrape felt like what? A warning. A reminder that the red moon was climbing higher into the sky. The alien mother kept glancing over her shoulder. Her silver skin pale in the moonlight. Her child trembled silently, too scared to even cry now. The human stood still for a moment. Listening, his hand rested on the hilt of his blade while his mind weighed the risk. He had fought dangerous things before, beasts with fangs the size of swords, soldiers with no mercy, machines built only to kill, but 300 monsters. That was no fight with suicide. The mother must have seen the thought in his eyes. "You can't," she whispered. "They will rip you apart. They don't stop until everything is dead." She shook her head firmly, her voice breaking. "I've seen it when they come. The ground turns red." But the human didn't turn away. He looked down at the child who was hiding his face against his mother's shoulder. That small figure reminded him of a night long ago. Another child. Another attack, a mistake that had cost lives. He had sworn to himself that if he ever had the chance, he would never stand by and watch again. He took a slow breath. "Where do they come from?" he asked. The alien mother hesitated. "From the dark hills beyond the river. They live in the caves there." Her voice shook. "They are fast. They climb walls. They dig under doors. They tear through stone." He looked toward the end of the street where the shadows shifted. He could see the first faint glints of their eyes, low to the ground, unblinking, hungry. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. She swallowed. "Minutes. Maybe less." He turned back to her. "Get inside somewhere." "Lock the door," he said. "There is nowhere left," she whispered. "The doors will not stop them." Her voice carried a hopeless truth that only someone who had lived through it could know. He opened the satchel slung across his shoulder. Inside were a few grenades, a pouch of ammunition, a steel flask, and a short coil of wire. Not much, certainly, not enough for 300 enemies. But sometimes the weapon didn't win the battle. Sometimes the will did. The mother reached out, grabbing his arm. "Don't," she begged. "If you fight, you die. And if you die, no one will help us after." Her eyes were pleading, but his were steady. "I'd rather try than watch them take you," he said simply. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. A loud, sharp howl cut through the night air. It was answered by dozens of others. The sound echoed off the buildings, making it impossible to tell from which direction they were coming. The human's body tensed. This was it. There would be no more time to think. He pulled a small blade from his belt and handed it to her. "Take this," he said. "If something gets past me, don't hesitate." She looked at the weapon in her hand, her fingers trembling. She had never held a human blade before. It felt heavier than she expected. The child peeked out at him for the first time. "Will you stop them?" the boy asked quietly. The human didn't smile, didn't make a promise he couldn't keep. "I'll do everything I can," he said, his voice firm, and somehow that seemed to be enough for the boy to cling to. The human stepped into the middle of the street. The red moon now hung fully above, bathing everything in an eerie crimson light. The shadows at the far end moved closer, one by one. Shapes emerged from the darkness, twisted, long-limbed creatures with skin like cracked stone and mouths too wide for their faces. Their eyes burned with a pale yellow light, and their claws dragged against the ground as they walked. The alien mother stayed back, her breath shallow. She counted more and more of them as they appeared from the darkness. 20, 30, 50. And still more came. She realized with horror that her warning had not been an exaggeration. They really were endless. The human dropped his satchel to the ground and opened it. He began laying out his tools: ammo clips, grenades, a small flare. The coil of wire. He worked quickly, but with precision. The creatures stopped at the edge of the light, crouching low, sniffing the air. One let out a snarl, and the rest began to spread out. Flanking him, the alien mother called out to him, her voice breaking, "Run." But he didn't move. Instead, he reached for his rifle, loaded a fresh magazine, and pulled the bolt with a sharp click. The sound echoed through the street like a challenge. The first monster stepped forward, drool dripping from its jagged teeth. The others followed, their claws digging into the dirt as they began to circle. The human stood tall, his silhouette black against the red light, inside. He felt the old fire, the one he thought he had buried years ago, burning to life. This was no longer about survival. This was about standing between death and the helpless. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, and the monsters obeyed. Rushing forward in a wave of teeth and claws, the battle for the village had begun. The first monster leaped from the shadows like a blur. Its claws gleamed in the red moonlight, aiming straight for the human's chest. He stepped aside at the last second, swinging his rifle up and firing point blank. The creature's head snapped back with a sickening crack, and it crumpled to the ground. The sharp smell of burning powder filled the air. The gunshot echoed through the street. It was like striking a hornet's nest. Every creature screamed. A chorus of rage that rattled the walls. They charged as one, their long limbs pounding the ground. The human didn't retreat. He planted his feet and fired again, each shot finding a target. Two more fell, their bodies sliding across the dirt. But the others didn't slow. From the corner of his eye, he saw the alien mother press her back against a wall, shielding her child with her own body. Her eyes darted between him and the swarm. Her breath coming fast. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Every street, every alley was filling with those yellow-eyed shapes. The human switched tactics. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin with his teeth, and hurled it into the densest part of the horde. A heartbeat later, fire and dirt exploded into the air. Throwing several monsters off their feet, the blast lit their faces for an instant. Rows of jagged teeth, cracked skin, and hunger that looked almost human. But as the smoke cleared, he saw more of them stepping over the bodies. Unafraid, he moved back slowly, reloading without looking at his hands. One of the creatures tried to flank him from the side, crawling low. Without turning, he kicked out hard, the heel of his boot connecting with its jaw. It let out a shriek, but another was already coming from behind. He spun, slashing with his knife, the blade cutting deep into its neck. Hot black blood sprayed across his arm, burning where it touched. Skin. The air was thick now with dust, smoke, and the stench of blood. The monsters were testing him, pushing from all sides. They didn't rush blindly anymore. They moved in small groups, darting in and out, waiting for him to tire, and that was their advantage. There were too many. Even if he killed 10, 20, 30, more would come. A low, deep growl rumbled from somewhere beyond the swarm. It was heavier, more powerful than the rest. The creatures around him seemed to pause for just a moment, their heads turning toward the sound. Then, as if answering a signal, they attacked together. Claws scraped against metal as one grabbed his rifle. Trying to tear it from his hands, he slammed his boot into its chest, yanked the weapon free, and fired again. The kick of the rifle echoed through his arms, but the monster's weight nearly knocked him over. From behind, another leaped, its jaws snapping inches from his neck. He rolled forward, slamming it to the ground. His knife flashed once, twice, and its body went still. He didn't even have time to breathe. 3 more were already closing in behind you. The alien mother screamed. Her voice cut through the chaos. He spun just in time to block a swipe that would have split him open. The claws caught his coat instead, ripping it wide, but not his flesh. He countered with a brutal rifle, but 2. The creature's face, sending it stumbling back into the others. The boy was crying now, not from pain, but from fear. The mother pulled him close, trying to shield his eyes. She had seen warriors fight before, but never one like this one who didn't step back, who met every attack with cold precision, and yet she could see the strain. His movements were fast, but his breathing was getting heavier, his steps slower. The monsters seemed to notice too. They began pressing harder. A claw caught his arm, slicing through the fabric and skin beneath. Warm blood ran down to his hand, but he didn't flinch. Pain was nothing new to him, only losing was, and he would not lose tonight. He ducked into a narrow side street. It forced the creatures to come at him in smaller numbers. They clawed at the walls, trying to climb over each other. He fired down the narrow lane, each bullet finding its mark. Bodies piled in the dirt, but still more came, their glowing eyes never blinking. The growl came again, closer now. The ground vibrated under his boots. Then, through the smoke, a shape appeared bigger than any of the others. Its head brushed the hanging signs, its claws digging trenches in the earth. The smaller monsters stepped aside for it, almost bowing as it passed. The human's grip tightened on his rifle. He knew this. One wasn't just another creature, was a leader. Maybe the one driving them all here. If he could take it down, maybe the rest would scatter. But before he could make a move, it opened its mouth and roared. The sound rattled the air, shook the windows, and froze the alien mother where she stood. The battle had only just begun, and the worst was already here. The giant creature stepped forward. Its shadow swallowed the street. And even the smaller monsters moved back to give it space. Its skin was thick and ridged like armor, its claws longer than swords. The human could see the faint steam rising from its mouth with every slow breath it took. Its glowing eyes locked on him, and for a moment the chaos around them seemed to fade. Then the roar came again, deep, long, and heavy enough to shake his bones. The smaller creatures reacted instantly, rushing toward him from all sides. The human knew what this was. The leader had called for his death, and the horde would obey. He moved fast, kicking a small pouch of black powder toward the ground. It burst into thick smoke, hiding him from their sight for a few seconds. He used those seconds to sprint toward a nearby wall, grabbing the coil of wire from his satchel. His fingers worked quickly, wrapping one end of the wire around a fallen post and the other to the base of a doorway. When the smoke cleared, 3 creatures rushed forward blindly. Their legs caught the wire, sending them crashing into the dirt. He finished them with 2 swift strikes of his blade. But there was no time to celebrate. The giant leader was still coming, and it didn't slow down for obstacles. Each step made the ground shake. Its claws carved into the cobblestones, throwing up shards of rock. The human fired at it too. 3-4 shots to the head, but the bullets barely pierced the thick hide. It roared, more in anger than pain. The alien mother watched from behind a broken wall, her arms tightened around her child. She had seen men try to fight these creatures before. Every one of them had been torn apart. But this human, he was different. He moved like he had fought monsters his whole life. Yet even she could see the truth. He was only one man, and the street was filling with more and more glowing eyes. The human retreated into a narrow alley. The monsters followed, their claws scraping along the walls. He tossed a grenade behind him, the blast shaking the alley and collapsing part of a building. Dust and rubble fell, crushing several creatures under the weight. But the leader wasn't slowed. It smashed through the wreckage like it was paper, sending stone flying. His mind raced. He couldn't kill all 300 here not in the open streets. He had to use the environment. He had to make the monsters fight on his terms, not theirs. He spotted a small square ahead a place where, for streets met, there were old carts, barrels, and broken market stalls scattered around. If he could funnel the monsters into this space, he could trap and burn them. He sprinted ahead, ignoring the pain in his side from the earlier wound. Every step felt heavier, but his will pushed him forward. The creatures followed him into the square. He quickly tipped over barrels filled with old oil and set the tops loose. The black liquid poured into the dirt, pooling in the center. The leader entered the square. Crouching low, as if it knew something was wrong, the human pulled a flare from his belt and lit it. The red glow lit his face as he tossed it into the oil. Flames roared to life instantly. Several monsters shrieked as the fire spread. The heat burned the air, and the smoke rose high into the night. The creatures trapped in the flames thrashed and screamed, but many more had stayed outside the square, circling like wolves, waiting for the fire to die. The leader didn't retreat. It jumped through the fire. Its hide smoldered, but it didn't slow. It slammed into the human with a force that knocked the wind from his lungs. His rifle clattered to the ground, sliding out of reach. He rolled just in time to avoid its claws tearing into the dirt where he had been. He reached for his knife and struck at its leg. The blade sank in a little, but not deep enough. The creature's tail swung like a whip, striking his side and sending him crashing into a wooden cart. Pain flared in his ribs. He coughed, tasting blood. He forced himself to stand around him. The smaller monsters were pushing against the edges of the fire. Some were leaping over the flames to join their leader. The alien mother saw it happen more, and more of them slipping past, closing in. She wanted to scream for him to run, but she saw the way he stood. Blood dripping from his chin, his blade in one hand, and a half-empty grenade pouch in the other. The giant roared again. The sound was so close it rattled the bones in his chest, but the human didn't back away. Instead, he pulled the pin from another grenade and tossed it under the leader's feet. The explosion lifted the massive creature off the ground, sending it crashing into a wall. The shockwave dropped several smaller monsters instantly. Dust filled the air. The human staggered to his knees, coughing. His ears rang, but through the haze he could still see the glowing eyes in the dark. The fight wasn't over. If anything, it was about to get even worse. The dust from the explosion drifted through the square. The air was heavy with the smell of burnt oil, gunpowder, and blood. The human coughed, his ribs aching with every breath, but he didn't take his eyes off the rubble where the giant leader had fallen. The smaller monsters were still moving, some crawling through the fire, others climbing over the broken walls. They had no fear, no hesitation. They came at him as if his bullets and blades meant nothing. He loaded his last full magazine. Every round had to count now. His rifle barked again and again, each shot cracking the night air. 2 creatures fell with clean headshots. Another spun sideways as a bullet tore through its neck, but for each one he killed, another 2 seemed to take its place behind the broken wall. The alien mother kept her child pressed to her chest. She could hear the sharp rhythm of gunfire. But what chilled her more was the sound between shots, the wet thud of claws hitting flesh, the snap of jaws, the grunt of a man forcing himself to keep fighting. The rubble shifted. A low, rumbling growl rolled out from beneath the collapsed wall. The leader was still alive. Stone cracked and tumbled away as the massive creature rose. Its hide was charred, one eye clouded with damage, but the other burned brighter than ever. It let out a roar so loud the fire itself seemed to flicker in fear. The human steadied himself, his legs felt heavy, and his side burned where the leader's tail had struck him earlier. But his eyes never left the monster. He knew if he didn't take it down now, there would be no one left to protect. The leader charged. Its weight shook the ground, The human dropped to one knee and fired, aiming for the damaged eye. The bullet struck true, and the creature's roar turned into a scream of pain, but it didn't stop, kept coming, slamming into him with bone-breaking force. The world tilted. He hit the ground hard. The wind knocked from his lungs. Claws raked across his shoulder. Tearing deep, blood poured down his arm, his fingers numb. He kicked at the monster's chest. Trying to push it back, it only made it angrier. The smaller monsters closed in, sensing weakness. He grabbed a grenade from his belt. His second-to-last hand pulled the pin. He shoved it into the mouth of the nearest creature. It exploded in a spray of fire and shards. Sending the others stumbling back for a moment, the leader lunged again. Jaws snapping, the human rolled away, barely avoiding the strike. His knife was gone. His rifle out of reach. All he had was his last grenade and the will to keep moving. He spotted a broken spear lying near one of the fallen villagers' carts. He grabbed it, spun it in his hands, and faced the leader again. The monster roared and came at him in a blur of claws and teeth. He sidestepped, ramming the spear deep into the wound in its neck. Black blood sprayed across his face, but the creature still didn't fall. It slammed into him, sending both of them crashing into the ground. Pain shot through his chest, and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to reach for the last grenade at his belt. With shaking hands, he pulled the pin and shoved it deep into the wound alongside the spear. Then he kicked off with all the strength he had left, rolling away as fast as his battered body could move. The grenade went off inside the beast. The explosion tore through its neck and chest. The leader let out one final, deafening scream before collapsing into the dirt. Its massive body twitched once, then went still. The smaller monsters froze. They looked at their fallen leader, then at the human standing over its body for the first time. There was hesitation in their glowing eyes. Then, as if some invisible signal passed through them, they turned and scattered into the night. Their roars faded into the distance until there was only the crackle of dying flames. The human stood swaying, his chest heaving. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest. He looked down at the leaders. Body its eyes dull now. The threat finally ended. He let the spear fall from his hands and sank to his knees from the shadows. The alien mother stepped forward. She looked at the ground littered with bodies, hundreds of monsters slain by one man. Her child peeked from behind her, eyes wide with awe instead of fear now. She didn't speak at first. She simply walked to him, and when she reached him, she knelt down, her voice shaking. "You saved us," she said. "You saved everyone." The human didn't answer. He only let out a long breath, looking at the quiet streets. For now, the village was safe. But he knew the night had cost him almost everything he had left to give. The fires were dying down. The red moon had slipped lower in the sky, and the first faint signs of dawn touched the horizon. The village that had once been filled with silence and fear now lay covered in the bodies of the slain creatures. The human stood in the middle of it all, his shoulders slumped, his clothes torn and soaked in blood, some his own, some not. One by one, the villagers began to emerge from their homes. They stepped cautiously at first, as if they feared the monsters might still be waiting in the shadows. But when they saw the human standing over the massive corpse of the leader, they froze. It was the kind of silence born from disbelief. No one had thought this was possible. The alien mother stepped out from behind a broken wall. Her child still clung to her side, but his eyes were no longer filled with terror. She walked slowly toward the human. When she reached him, she looked at the ground between them for a moment. "You fought them all," she said softly, "even when we told you it was impossible." He didn't answer right away. His breaths were still heavy, his wounds still fresh. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Someone had to stand between them and you. The villagers began to gather around, their eyes wide with gratitude and something else respect. One of the elders, a tall alien with skin like polished stone, stepped forward carrying a small chest. He opened it to reveal gold coins, gemstones, and ancient silver charms. "This is the treasure of our people," the elder said. "It is yours now." The human looked at the chest for only a moment before shaking his head. "Keep it," he said simply. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elder frowned. "Then name your price." "Anything." The human looked toward the alien mother and her child. "I don't want gold," he said, his voice steady. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the noise of the crowd faded away. He remembered her fear when they first met, the way she had clutched her son. He remembered the boy's quiet question, "Will you stop them?" and the trust in his eyes when he answered. The alien mother stepped closer. Her silver skin catching the first light of morning, she knelt in front of him, placing her hand over her heart. "Then let this be your reward," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "My son and I, we are yours if you will have us." The human blinked, caught off guard. "That's not," he started, but she shook her head. "You gave us life when we had nothing left," she said. "So now, our lives are yours, not as debt, but as family." She looked at her child, who nodded shyly before stepping forward and hugging the human's leg. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached down and rested his hand on the boy's head. The crowd watched in silence. Some were smiling, others wiping away tears. They had seen warriors before, but never one who fought for no reward. The elder stepped forward again. "Then it is decided," he said. "From this day forward, you are one of us." The villagers murmured in agreement. Some stepped forward to touch his arm or shoulder in a gesture of thanks. Others began clearing the battlefield, dragging the monster corpses away to be burned. The alien mother stayed close to him. Her son held his hand now, as if afraid that if he'd let go, the human might disappear. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "Why didn't you?" He thought about it for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," he said, "and I won't let it happen again if I can stop it." She didn't reply with words. Instead, she gave him a look that carried both gratitude and something deeper. An unspoken bond formed in the fire and blood of the night. The sun began to rise fully now. The light chased away the last shadows, revealing a village still standing because one man had chosen to fight. The monsters would not come again, not soon. Not while their leader's body lay as a warning. The human, the alien mother, and her child stood together at the edge of the square. For the first time since they had met, there was no fear in their eyes, only hope. The sun was higher now, painting the sky with pale gold. The air smelled of smoke from the fires that burned the creatures' bodies beyond the village walls. The human stood at the edge of the square, his gear packed, his wounds bound with cloth the villagers had given him. He was ready to leave, but this time he would not walk the road alone. The alien mother approached with her child. She wore clean clothes now, simple but neat, and her hair had been brushed back from her face. Her son clutched a small wooden toy one of the villagers had carved for him when they stopped in front of the human. She looked at him with a steady gaze. "We are ready," she said softly. He looked at her for a moment. "You don't have to come with me," he said. "You have a home here now," but she shook her head. "You are the reason we have a home at all," she replied. "Where you go, we go." The boy stepped forward, tugging on the human's coat. "Will you still protect us?" he asked. The human crouched down so they were eye to eye. "I will," he said, "but you have to promise me something, both of you." They both tilted their heads. "You have to protect me too," he said with a faint smile. The boy grinned. "For the first time since they'd met, I can do that," he said proudly. The alien mother's lips curved into a small, rare smile. It was the kind of smile that spoke of healing, a slow, cautious step toward a better life. The villagers gathered to see them off. Some offered food for the journey. Others gave blankets or small charms for protection. The elder stood at the front, his voice carrying across the crowd. "You came to us a stranger," he said to the human, "and you leave as one of our own." He turned to the alien mother and child. "You carry with you our blessing." The human nodded in silent thanks. He wasn't one for speeches. Instead, he adjusted the strap of his satchel and looked down the road ahead. It stretched far, winding between the hills, disappearing into the horizon. They started walking. The human took the lead, his boots steady on the dirt road. The alien mother walked beside him, her steps light but certain. Her son trotted between them, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes his. For a long while, they walked in silence. It wasn't the silence of strangers, it was the silence of people who didn't need words to understand one another. The road was quiet, except for the sound of their steps and the distant call of morning birds. After some time, the mother spoke, her voice thoughtful. "Where will we go?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Somewhere safe. Somewhere the monsters can't follow." She looked at him, studying his face. "You've been running from something too, haven't you?" She asked gently. He gave a small nod. "Maybe," he said. "But now?" "Maybe I'm not running anymore." The boy ran ahead a few steps, swinging his toy like a sword. "Look," he called out, pointing to a small grove of trees ahead. "It's like a forest castle." The human chuckled, and the mother smiled. It was a simple moment, but it was more precious than gold. They stopped by a stream to rest. The human knelt to fill a flask with water. The mother sat on a smooth rock, watching her son play by the water's edge. She glanced at the human, her eyes softening. "You don't know what you've given us," she said. He looked up. "A second chance." She shook her head. "No." "A future." He didn't reply. Instead, he handed her the flask. They drank in turns, and for the first time, he realized how natural it felt to share these small moments with them. When they continued walking, the road felt different. It wasn't the lonely, endless path he had always known. It was the start of something new. Each step carried the weight of survival, but also the lightness of hope. He had fought for their lives, and now they were giving him something in return: belonging. By the time the sun dipped low again, they had reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The mother stepped up beside him, her son perched on her hip. The view stretched for miles: rolling fields, distant rivers, and beyond that, a faint shimmer of mountains. "This," the human said quietly, "might be where we stop." The boy looked at him and asked, "Will we be safe here?" The human rested a hand on the boy's head. "As long as I'm here." "Yes," he said. They stood there for a moment, the wind in their hair. The future opened before them. The night would come again, and with it, new dangers. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Somewhere behind them, far away, the village would tell stories of the night. One man stood against 300 monsters. But here, on the ridge, he was not a legend, not a warrior. He was simply a man with a family, ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in years, he felt at peace.